Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to picture someone, maybe it's you, who has, successfully navigated years of academic life. You've completely mastered the art of the argumentative essay. You know how to craft a thesis, structure your points, land a great conclusion. You feel like you're ready for anything. And then that syllabus drops, and it has the big one, the research paper. And just like that, all that confidence, it evaporates. You're sitting there, maybe in the library, staring at this assignment that says 15 pages, 15 peer-reviewed sources, and this terrifying thought just pops into your head. Wait a minute, isn't this just a really, really long essay? So why does it feel so impossible?
That's the moment, isn't it? That feeling of, why do I have to reinvent my whole process? It's so incredibly common.
Exactly. And that moment, that realization that a research paper is not just a longer essay, that is the critical hurdle. So today, we are deep diving into that. The purpose, the process, the expectations, they're all fundamentally different. Clarifying that is our mission today.
It is. And that confusion happens because, on the surface, they look similar. They both use words, they have paragraphs, but they're powered by completely different engines.
Oh, I like that. An engine analogy.
Yeah, think of it this way. An essay might be a really well-tuned car, but a research paper is an aircraft. It needs complex systems, rigorous pre-flight checks, before it even hope to get off the ground.
Okay, so what's the core difference then?
It boils down to this. An essay proves your capacity to argue. It often uses your own reasoning and general knowledge. A research paper, on the other hand, proves your ability to investigate. It's a structured, evidence-based investigation into a very specific question.
Anchoring every single claim in scholarship.
Every single one. A verifiable scholarship.
So what does this mean for you, the person listening? It means you have to adjust your whole approach from the get-go. This isn't about padding an old argument. It's about building a structure of knowledge from scratch. And we're going to give you that blueprint. We're going to look at the 4 major areas where they diverge. First, the purpose and scope. The big move from opinion to investigation.
Then the essential academic skills you build along the way.
After that, the huge formal differences in structure and tone.
And finally, what might be the most important part? The non-negotiable standards for sources and originality.
So let's start right there, at the foundation. This essential difference in approach, moving from personal reasoning to rigorous external evidence.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so think back to those standard essays you've written. When you wrote about a theme in a novel or the benefits of some policy, your approach probably relied pretty heavily on your personal experience.
Your general knowledge, things you could pull from your own life.
Exactly. Take a really basic prompt like, discuss the benefits of reading. In an essay, you could talk passionately about getting lost in a story, right? You'd use anecdotes about the book that changed your life.
And that's what the assignment wants. It's designed to see if you can organize your thoughts into a coherent argument.
Your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's the key phrase right there, isn't it?
It is. The focus is internal. It's about articulating your perspective. A research paper completely flips that. It turns it outside in. It forces you to gather information from a huge range of academic sources, critically evaluate it, and then build an argument based entirely on that external evidence.
So this is way more than just sprinkling in a few quotes to back up what you already think.
Oh, it's a monumental shift in intellectual authority. Your voice is still there, for sure. You're the architect designing the building.
Right.
But every single brick, every beam has to be validated and supported by established, credible evidence from the field. If your evidence crumbles, the whole argument just collapses.
I think the best way to frame this is maybe the monologue versus conversation idea.
I like that.
In an essay, you're the star, right? You're delivering a powerful monologue. But in a research paper, you're more like the conductor, or maybe the moderator of a really formal, really detailed conversation between dozens of experts.
Yes, and you have to listen first.
You have to. Before you can even think about your own thesis, you have to listen intently to what other scholars have already found, what data they've collected. Only after all that listening can you respond with your own interpretation.
And that interpretation has to be supported by their data, their theories, not just your gut feeling.
And that leads right to the big pain point for the student, doesn't it?
Right.
If your authority comes from this external evidence, your personal feelings have to take a back seat.
They have to. The question completely shifts from, what do I passionately believe about this, to something much colder.
Which is?
What does the overwhelming, verifiable evidence suggest about this very focused question? You have to intentionally adopt this stance of academic distance.
Setting aside bias, intuition, all of it.
All of it. in favor of objective measured analysis, that intellectual movement from opinion-driven writing to evidence-driven investigation. That is the defining feature of research.
And what keeps that whole investigation on track? It can't be just a general theme like social media.
No, absolutely not. It's the research question. That specific, tightly defined question is the rudder for the entire project.
An essay might have a broad thesis, but a research paper is trying to answer one highly defined, often novel question that demands real investigation.
Exactly. It's not just rearranging thoughts you already have. And the examples from our source material really illustrate this perfectly. They show the kind of specificity you need.
Let's break one down. The first one is, how does social media influence language learning habits?
Okay, so the beginner might think, oh, simple, I'll just write about Duolingo and how much I like it.
Right, that's the essay mindset.
Right.
But the scope of that research question is immense. You can't answer that with just your own experience.
You need empirical data. You'd have to go find rigorous studies on user behavior across multiple platforms, TikTok, Instagram, not just the obvious ones. You'd be looking at actual retention rates, comparing formal instruction to informal learning.
And looking at actual linguistic outcomes, like are people gaining fluency or just vocabulary? You're investigating correlation, maybe causation, not just listing benefits you thought of.
Exactly. And what about the second example? What factors contribute to student motivation in university settings? That's another really complex one.
Yeah, that forces you way outside the box of just, study hard.
It forces you into specialized academic fields. You'd have to look at established psychological models like self-determination theory. You'd have to integrate demographic studies on economic background, compare different teaching styles,
Active learning versus lectures.
and even understand institutional barriers. It's a massive systematic gathering and evaluation of data from a dozen different places.
And that third one is fascinating. How does urban design impact physical and mental health?
Yeah.
That's a convergence of fields right there.
A huge one. You aren't just talking about parks are nice. You have to investigate public health data, like obesity rates, in relation to a city's walkability score.
You'd have to look at architecture, city planning, sociology.
Environmental psychology, studies on noise pollution, access to green space, it's all connected. These examples just show that the research process insists on systematic investigation.
Your primary goal is not to express an opinion.
Not at all. It's to gather information, evaluate it with rigorous skepticism, and then present a structured, logical, evidence-based response to that very specific question.
So if you approach this with an essay mindset, you're going to fail to meet the core expectation.
Fundamentally.
And that investigative discipline, it leads us right into our next area.
Yeah.
The actual skills you gain from this process, because if the purpose is this deep investigation, the tools you need are way more sophisticated.
That's right. The primary goal is producing knowledge, answering that question. But the secondary purpose, and for the student, arguably the more vital one, is skill acquisition. The research paper is, first and foremost, a demonstration. It shows you can responsibly and rigorously engage in actual scholarship. It proves you can explore complex ideas, weigh contradictory perspectives, and build your own academic position using evidence.
So the finished paper is the product, but the real value is in the intellectual toolbox you build while you're writing it.
Exactly. That's where the real education lies.
Okay, so let's drill down on that toolkit. Because I think a lot of us, when we start out, think the whole thing is just about finding information.
Right, like a scavenger hunt. But it's not. The most valuable skills are all about processing that information, not just accumulating it. The first big one is critical thinking.
And that's the opposite of just consuming information.
Completely. It's
Yeah.
not just reading a study and accepting the finding. It's asking the hard questions. Who funded this study? What are the biases in their methodology? Does their sample size really justify this huge conclusion? You are actively questioning the source, the method, the assumptions behind every single piece of data you find.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That requires a different kind of reading. You can't just read for the summary, which is what we often do for essays.
You can't. And that brings us to the next skill. Analytical reading.
So deconstructing the argument.
Precisely. You're reading to understand the argument, yes, but also to deconstruct its evidence structure.
Sure.
In a scientific paper, for instance, you have to isolate the methodology, the results, and the discussion sections to see if the author's interpretation actually holds up.
So if they conclude X, but their data table looks a bit shaky.
Your job is to spot that, to point out that discrepancy. You are reading for intellectual weakness, not just for comprehension.
Okay, and then the most sophisticated skill, the one that really defines advanced research writing. Synthesis.
Ah, yes. Synthesis. This is the bridge between analysis and original thought. It's not about just stringing quotes together one after another.
So let's use a concrete example. Say you're researching student persistence. You read Article A, a psychology paper on self-efficacy. Then you read Article B, a sociology paper on how economic disparity affects graduation rates.
Right. If you were just summarizing, you'd say Article A says this and Article B says that. End of story.
But synthesis is different.
Synthesis requires you to connect those two previously separate ideas. Your paper's unique contribution might be to argue that the economic disparity from Article B directly undermines a student's sense of self-efficacy from Article A.
So you're creating a new understanding, a new connection.
You are weaving different threads of scholarship together to create a new tapestry of knowledge. That's synthesis.
And that should be a huge aha moment for the listener. You don't have to invent a whole new theory from scratch. You just need to see the relationships between existing findings that no one else has pointed out yet.
Exactly. And of course, all of this is anchored by the fundamentals, academic writing, which demands a level of precision you don't use every day, and the absolutely critical skill of citation.
Responsible research practices.
Yes, students often see citation as just, a bureaucratic chore, box to pick.
It feels like that sometimes, yeah.
But it's the ethical core of all scholarship. It's about responsible attribution. It's acknowledging the intellectual debt you owe to the researchers whose work you are building on. It's an ethical code.
So when you master that, you're not just a student anymore. You're a genuine academic investigator.
That's the transformation.
And this should really relieve some of that pressure we talked about. You're not expected to be a revolutionary genius on day one. You're just being asked to conduct a guided, systematic investigation and show you can use this toolkit.
The process is the point. The paper teaches how to think deeply, how to evaluate information, and how to communicate complex, evidence-based ideas.
It's the getting there that builds the expertise.
Precisely. And once you understand that investigative purpose and the skills you need, then the structure of the paper starts to make a lot more sense. It has to be a scientific report, and that requires an architecture that's far beyond the simple frame of an essay.
Right, it's not just intro, body, conclusion anymore.
Not even close. The research paper has a much more formal, much more detailed architecture. The essay's body paragraphs can often be rearranged for flow.
But a research paper is more like a detailed map, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's designed for transparency, for replicability. It's not about a fluid argument. It's a precise report where every part has a technical job.
Exactly. So let's break down that full formal model you see in the sciences and social sciences. Even in the humanities where it's a bit shorter, these principles still apply.
Okay.
So after the introduction, where you state your research question and your thesis, you immediately hit the literature review. And this is the part that is most foreign to the essay writer.
This is where we need to spend some time. The lit review is often the first massive stumbling block. Students treat it like a long list of summaries.
A long, annotated bibliography. But it's so much more technical. A strong literature review does three crucial things. First, it establishes the historical and conceptual context. It shows you understand where these ideas came from.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, and this is critical, it organizes the existing scholarship thematically. You don't just list 15 studies, you group them. You'd have sections like studies on intrinsic motivation, studies on external rewards, and so on.
So you see the big picture, the trends in the conversation.
You're demonstrating mastery. And the third, most important function of the literature review is to identify the gap.
The gap.
This is where you show the reader, look at all this brilliant work that's been done, but this specific question, my research question, hasn't been answered yet.
So that gap is your justification for the entire paper. It's how you prove your investigation is necessary.
It's your intellectual entry ticket. It formally separates what's already known from your unique contribution.
And then, if your paper involves collecting your own data, the next section is the methodology. I mean, you almost never see that in an essay.
Right, and for good reason. The methodology is the technical core that ensures your work is reliable.
And it has to be painfully detailed. Why is that rigor so mandatory?
It's all about replicability and validity. The methodology explains, in almost recipe-like detail, how you did your investigation. Who were the participants? What was your sampling strategy? What specific tools did you use?
So another researcher could, in theory, repeat your exact steps.
That's the goal. A researcher in Berlin should be able to read your methodology, replicate your procedure, and see if they get similar results. If they can't, your findings aren't reliable. An essay is self-contained. A A research paper has to be open for technical scrutiny.
And all of that formal structure, it leads directly to a massive difference in tone.
The tone is mandatory. Essays allow for rhetorical flourishes, even passion. Research writing demands clarity, precision, and objectivity. You have to consciously strip away your personal feelings to let the evidence speak for itself.
Let's talk about language choice, because this can be counterintuitive. In an essay, we're taught to use strong declarative sentences, but in research, that changes. You have to use what's called hedging language.
That is absolutely critical. Hedging language is using words that signal caution and avoid absolute statements. So instead of writing "social media destroys communication," the academic tone requires something more nuanced, like "social media appears to influence communication patterns," or "data suggests a correlation between X and Y."
Why the caution, though?
Because academic claims are almost never absolute truths. They're probabilistic findings constrained by your methodology and your sample size. By using qualifiers like may, suggests, seems, indicates, you're showing you understand the limitations of your evidence. You aren't overstating your case.
So this shift is fundamental. In an essay, you might write, "I am convinced that climate change is the single greatest threat."
Right.
But in a paper, you have to write, "Evidence suggests that anthropogenic climate change poses a significant long-term risk, based on projections by source X and source Y." You're persuading through the rigor of your sources, not your personal conviction.
That's it exactly. The focus shifts entirely from expressing personal feelings to delivering evidence-driven, measured analysis that can be verified and debated by others based on the data alone.
Which brings us to the foundation of that entire structure, the sources themselves.
The sources. If the tone is objective and the structure is transparent, the evidence itself has to be impeccable. This is the single most critical, non-negotiable difference between the two forms of writing.
Okay.
Essays might tolerate reputable news sources or well-researched websites, but a research paper always demands credible academic references. The strength and validity of your entire argument depends on the quality of the sources you choose.
So you're leveraging the credibility of the entire academic world.
You are.
So let's be super explicit about what that high-quality foundation looks like. We're talking about materials that have gone through the highest level of vetting, right? Peer review.
Peer review is the gold standard. We're talking about books from major university presses, Harvard, Oxford, places like that. We mean journal articles from scholarly, peer-reviewed journals.
We should probably define what peer-reviewed actually means.
We should. For you, the learner, this means that before an editor published that article, it was sent, usually anonymously, to 2 or 3 other established experts in that exact same field.
So your peers.
Our peers. And they rigorously scrutinize the methodology, they challenge the interpretation, they check the ethics, and they force revisions. It's an intense process.
So when you cite a peer-reviewed article, you're not just citing one author. You're citing a finding that has already survived this brutal vetting process.
That's the intellectual weight you're adding to your argument.
And on the flip side, we have to talk about the sources to avoid. The moment a student cites a casual website, a blog, a Wikipedia entry as a primary source,
the academic rigor of the paper is immediately compromised. Your argument is only as strong as its weakest piece of evidence. If the evidence hasn't been scrutinized, the conclusion is untrustworthy.
But it goes beyond just knowing where to look, doesn't it? How does a student evaluate the quality of a peer-reviewed source itself?
That's where the next level research skill comes in. You start to develop an eye for things like a journal's impact factor.
A metric for how often it's cited by others.
Right. A citation from a high-impact journal carries a lot more weight. You also look at the funding statement. Who paid for this research?
So if a study on a new drug was funded by the company that makes it,
that is a data point you have to account for. You don't necessarily reject the source, but you acknowledge the potential bias and you weigh its findings with that in mind. That is responsible investigation.
Okay, so this is the point where the anxiety peaks again. The student has spent weeks reading dozens of high-quality sources, and they look at their draft and they think, this is just a pile of quotes and summaries. Where am I in all this? Is my paper even original?
The originality paradox. It's a powerful and a very valid fear.
How do we solve it?
We have to redefine what originality means for a research writer. It does not mean you have to invent a new planet or overturn 50 years of physics. You are expected to make a unique intellectual contribution to the existing conversation.
And that contribution is the synthesis we talked about earlier.
It is. Your originality is demonstrated in your unique capacity to create a new narrative from the existing data. Think of yourself as a master weaver. You're given all these threads of different colors. Economic theories, sociological data, psychological models,
And your job is to connect them in a new way.
in a way that generates a new insight. Maybe your originality is applying an old theory to a brand new context. Or maybe it's simply in the rigor of your comparison, taking two contradictory theories and showing how, through a 21st century lens, they're actually complementary.
So the originality comes from the writer's unique capacity to connect, interpret, and synthesize.
Yes, you're creating a new understanding of material that already exists. And that intellectual work of synthesis, of organization, of argument building, that is your original contribution to scholarship. You're building on the work of giants, but the final structure, the focus, the interpretation, that is entirely and uniquely yours.
So when we put it all together, the shift from opinion to evidence, the skills, the structure, the sources, the student who grasps these four pillars realizes that the research paper isn't just a longer essay.
Not at all. It's a demonstration of their readiness to enter the academic conversation as a responsible, rigorous participant.
So if we're to synthesize everything we've just discussed, the research paper isn't really a document you submit for a grade. It's more of a journey.
A journey of intellectual accountability. I like that.
It starts with that focused question, continues through the, arduous but rewarding process of investigation, evaluating sources, weighing evidence, and it concludes with a clear, well-supported argument.
And the goal for you, the person listening, is to see that research writing is a formal, disciplined process that teaches responsible exploration and deep, accountable thinking. It's the core mechanism for how knowledge is validated and advanced in the real world.
It's a skill set that goes way beyond the classroom. You're developing this high-level academic toolkit that's indispensable for any complex problem solving. You're not just writing a paper, you're forging essential intellectual habits.
You're learning how to choose strong topics and develop questions that are so specific they can actually be answered.
You're mastering how to find and evaluate academic sources, so your foundation is built on vetted knowledge, not just intuition.
You're gaining expertise in building sophisticated, multi-layered arguments and structuring them according to verifiable standards. And most importantly,
You're developing the mindset of a scholar.
yes, learning how to critically and ethically integrate external evidence into your own narrative, proving you know how to think, not just what to think.
That emphasis on verified evidence and objectivity, that's the key. And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over, something to connect the rigor of this academic world to the information you see every day. So if the standard academic research paper requires us to strip away our personal conviction, to move insistently from I believe towards research suggests, and to rely only on evaluated, credible sources, then what implications does that fundamental discipline shift in communication have for the quality, the integrity, and the credibility of public discourse, of debate, of news consumption, outside the safe walls of the academic sphere?
That's a powerful question.
Think about that academic standard, that insistence on verified evidence, the next time you encounter a strong opinion out there in the world.
A truly important standard to remember as you start your own rigorous investigations.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep digging into those complex ideas, keep synthesizing those concepts, and never stop questioning the sources.